This is why now our dishwashers break in 5 years because we have too many short-term thinkers at the top. Like basically, women are designed to be the containers. We're the long-term, like directional, making sure resources are shared, et cetera, et cetera. And men are fantastic producers. They have amazing energy. And I love men. I love them so much. But the construct we're living in right now has brought us so far out of balance and cut off.
Definitely apply it to how we're living, just not just in work life, but in personal life as people leading ourselves. And I never thought about it that way. I'm so glad to have you on. Before we get too deep into the conversation and miss proper introductions, do you mind sharing some of your background and your journey? I'm fascinated to hear it. I saw you're a former opera singer, so and I can hear that wonderful timbre in your voice. So I'd love to hear your journey and what has brought you thus far.
Yeah, it's really been an interesting journey actually, and I've been reflecting on it a lot because I'm at this sort of pivot point right now in my career where I realized that the last number of years and are similar to the first number of years in that I was being driven by limiting beliefs that were sort of imposed on me by others or that I accepted from others based on their viewpoint of the world. So when I left university, I was teaching in the public school system and singing in the opera. And it took me about 12 years and a lung tumor to figure out that both of those careers were not for me, that both of those careers have quite narrow parameters. And I'm not a very good small box person. But I didn't really know that because I kept listening to my parents who were super practical people. They're like, basically you need a real job, right? But what that led me to believe, because, of course, kids are meaning making machines, even young adults humans are meaning making machines. And when someone who is close in your orbit like that tells you something, you internalize it in a way that no other advice ever gets internalized. And the meaning that I made out of the get a real job part was you're not really good enough to make it as a singer. And that colored everything that I did in my singing world. And so what happened was I got so miserable, I used to wish something would kill me. It was really what it was. And I'm really good at getting what I wished for. So when the lung tumor showed up, I was like, oh, right. I don't need to die to be free. I'm already free and I can choose to change. And so I went on leave, of course, and concentrated on my health. And 6 months after that, the tumor was gone. And I had a job doing corporate training at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a big professional services, accounting, like financial services firm. Then in the meantime, like in the median time, I was working with a coach because I'm a big fan of coaching and support, obviously. If you do it, you got to get it, right? You got to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. So I was sitting with him in his office one day, and he literally looked at me and he was like, "Well, what do you want to be when you grow up, little lady?" It's kind of an alpha male dude, And bless him for saying that. And I literally had this divine download. It was like clear as day, this vision of my company name, which was at the time was ICU in a circle. It was Times New Roman font, silver lettering, purple background. It was like crazy specific with image consulting underneath it. And then the first tagline I ever used, which was in intensive care for your image. And I just started to laugh. I'm like, well, that's not even a real job. Like, who does that job? And he said to me, no, like that's a real job and you could do that job. And so there's no regulation in my industry at all. Like you could hang your shingle out tomorrow and say I'm an image consultant and nobody would blink. So at the time, I'm like, I look all right. I've read some books. I will get a website and some business cards and start practicing. So that's what I did. And I don't recommend that approach to anybody now. I'm like, please, if you want to get into this field, get some training. Do not just jump in because it's very intimate and it's very psychological and you can do a lot of damage if you're not trained. So there's that. But I didn't know any better. So I did that. And then when I was divinely ejected from my corporate job in 2009 in the middle of the recession, I'm like, this is a great time to start an image consulting business full time. So I went to Toronto here in Canada and I got my certifications in image consulting and advanced image consulting at the International Image Institute. And then Karen Brunger, who is my mentor, she runs that company. She liked me. So I interned with her. And then she really liked me. So she made me her Western Canada image trainer. So in addition to my private practice, I was also training consultants how to be consultants because of all my corporate training and educational background. And so then, as I was going along, I've always taken a real coach approach to my work, and I've always taken a very inside out approach to it. And my clients would get promoted and they'd go up the chain in their companies. And then they would be like, okay, we want you to come work with our executive teams, but we're tired of explaining to the people that write the checks that you're not really an image consultant. So I was like, well, all right, I'll just change my business name to Lazaruk Consulting and then I can do what I like. So at the time, I saw it as just kind of following the market. But over the last 7 years, I've been doing this corporate work and I'm like, wait a minute. Now I'm living in this limiting belief that I can only have the kind of impact that I want to have and earn what I want to earn if I'm in the corporate space, when actually that's not true. And in the corporate space, I ended up doing things because it was a classic case of just because you can doesn't mean you should, where this limiting belief kept me in this realm that I escaped from in 2009. And I was like, okay, I find myself facilitating like a strategic work back. And I'm like, this is not my zone of genius. My zone of genius is helping you understand very clearly who you are and using that as cues to figure out what you're supposed to be doing on this planet, and then help you look and behave and communicate in the best possible way for you to do the thing you're meant to do on the planet. That's my zone of genius. And whether I'm doing it with a CEO or someone who's new is irrelevant, but it's all still image consulting at the heart of it. And really, what the issue wasn't that the people that wrote the checks had to have a different explanation that I wasn't really an image consultant. It's that they didn't really know what image consulting is. And they didn't understand that it's really soul work disguised as style work, at least the way I practice it. And that's getting people to talk to each other. It's getting people to be vulnerable. It's getting people to know who they are so they can tell other people who they are and they can interact more effectively together. So, if I'm facilitating a deep conversation between executive team members so they actually trust each other, amazing. That's image consulting work all day, right? It's about identity. It's not about the clothes.
Wow. I am so glad we're having this conversation, especially now in the time of year, Catherine, because this whole past year, almost every guest has brought up the understanding that leaders need to have self awareness.
Yes.
And that is so important and crucial to understand themselves first before they try to take care of a team, other people, from a multitude of different reasons. And this episode is sort of like the culmination of how do we actually get to that point and then develop that image. And I knew we would dive deep. I didn't realize quite how deep we were going to dive. And I want to hear more about how do you get to that soul searching, if you will, or understanding that person. And it's not just the visual image that we're talking about and the clothing, but it is that inner person. So how do we approach that? I feel like overwhelmed and mesmerized, inspired all at the same time.
Yeah, it can feel like a lot because soul work is a lot. Like the whole purpose of being on this planet is to be embodied, to have a human experience. And so someone asked me on a podcast a couple interviews ago, they said, what does it mean to be human? And I said, to be human means to be limited and unlimited at the same time. So it can feel like a lot, like a big journey. But the beauty of it is all you need is to be willing to look. That's where you start. And if you're not willing to look, then you just be willing to be willing to look. And if you're not willing to be willing to look, then you're like, well, maybe I could be willing to be willing to be willing to look. It's like, what is the smallest? And the first piece is I have to be willing to look because what I notice is, and this was true for me too, I had this, everybody has an I am at the center of who they are. You're born with it. Who you are at 4 is who you are at 104. Like the essence of you doesn't change. And the essence of you is a bazillion to one odds that you would be who you are at this time on this plane in this container, like in this body, in this time and space. The odds are insane. Things that needed to happen for you to be here. So the first piece is I just need to be willing. And I think what people are afraid of is they're afraid that when they look, they're not going to like what they see, or they're afraid that people won't like what's there. And I think that's the thing that stops people most often is the deep fear that there's something wrong with them for whatever reason, cultural conditioning, religious programming, any of those things can harm you in that way. But I want to say to anyone who's listening, there's nothing wrong with you. You are inherently good. You are inherently worthy, and you deserve to be here and to do whatever it is you need to do to get on the path to doing your work here in the world, because that's the whole point. So the first step is I'm willing. And the beauty of that is in order to, everybody's like, oh, I want to look about the good things about me. I'm like, great, start there. Start with what's good, start with what's working. And then as you start to feel a little bit better about that, then you can go and honestly look at what is not working. And you can say, okay, this is not working. What is not working about it? Like, for example, in my life, I am a big personality. I have a lot of energy, a lot of life force. And if you imagine my poor parents, like seriously, this energy in a 3-year-old, very challenging. So I understand why they didn't feel like it was safe for me to be big. So I had this idea there's something wrong with me, right? I'm too much, I'm too this, I'm too that. But as I went on in life, I sort of was like, the I am part of me was conflicted because I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be like this. But the people close to me are telling me I'm not supposed to be like this. So there's confusion there. And as I started to dig into that, I'm like, oh, okay, this environment that I'm in is teaching me about how to keep my volume small when that is what's keeping me safe. Right. So that was the first thing. It was like, okay, so that this too muchness about me that I thought was bad is actually really great. And once I got into environments where there were people around me going, yeah, this is great that you're so big, that's when my idea of it started to change. But way back in my image training, one of my teachers said, I'm like, I just want you to hear me. Cause that's what happens. Like when you're confused and you're squished, then you just get, at least I did, just get louder. Like, you will hear me, which is not great because then it pushes people away. You're like a snowplow, just, you know, pushing everything out of your way. And he said to me, he goes, what is this need to be heard? And so that's when we started to dig into it. And then he said, he goes, you're an elephant. And he said, you need to learn how to be an elephant without scaring the mice. Hey, you need to learn how to be an elephant without scaring the mice. And this is like 15 years ago. So since that pivot of like this life force and this big energy is really great. And I also need to be aware of the impact that I have on others. So you were talking earlier about how all the guests are bringing forward this need for self-awareness. Huge. There's also a need for other awareness as well. But other awareness through the lens of don't want to diminish myself or lie about myself in order to make other people comfortable. But I want to be aware that if I have this large energy, then I need to understand how my large energy can be encompassing and inviting and magnetic and glorious and permissive rather than obnoxious, rude, pushy, challenging. Because I can push all those buttons too, right? But it's this idea of like navigating who am I as a person and how can I live with myself and then how can I help others live with me too.
I love it, Catherine. You're allowing for yourself to breathe and take up your space at the same time, compliment other people, not conflict with other people
Right.
taking up space too.
That's right.
And yeah, it makes absolute sense. Everything you're saying resonates so strongly. And it makes me think about how maybe we've been taught how things should be. And I find should is a very nebulous word because
Yeah, don't shit on yourself.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
heavy. It's like obligatory. I should.
We should do that, or it's speaking to some ideal that somebody else maybe set up, or a certain kind of society or culture that maybe isn't realistic either. And maybe I'm being a little bit too big there and generalizing, but I just find that I'm more attuned or attentive to the word should these days.
Mhm. I think what's happening is I think there's a real shift. I think on the large scale, what's happening is we live in a cis white hetero patriarchal culture. That's the environment we're swimming in. And so it was built by men for men and it runs to the benefit of men or to masculine energy because of course every person has different degrees of masculine feminine energy, like a linear energy, right? And
Yeah.
that makes total sense because in early spirituality, like in like matriarchal cultures or matrilineal cultures, men and women worked together functionally. And what's happened is right around particularly in North America because it is largely a Christian like based society, but it's based on there's two things that are at play. One is that there's like a biological piece of it. So like men run on a 24-hour hormonal clock. So it makes sense for them to do the same thing, the same time, the same way every day because their energy is the same time, the same way every day. So women in this construct get a really bad rap for being unpredictable. But women are incredibly predictable over a 28-day cycle. And so hormonally, every phase, like every week of our cycle, we have a different kind of energy. So like in our menstruation phase, we're in the cave. Like we're tired, we need to rest. We're gaining spiritual insights. We're like resting and reflecting. In the follicular phase, in the springtime, right? We're ideas, brainstorming, we're starting new things. The growth energy is there. Then in the ovulation phase, full moon, we're shining, we're magnetic, it's amazing. Then we're speaking, we're getting out, we're talking to people, we're connecting. And then in the luteal phase, we're preparing to rest again, but we're getting things done. We can focus really well. Our tolerance for bull goes way down and our attention to detail goes way high. So that's why women are typically more easily irritated at that time because we're paying attention to what needs to change and what we know what we're noticing so that then we can go, okay, I'm noticing these things. I'm going to take that into the cave when I'm resting and reflecting. And then I can think about there what I need to do with it. And then I can use the growth energy in the next phase of my cycle to do something about that, to change it. So what happened, this is why now our dishwashers break in 5 years because we have too many short-term thinkers at the top. Like basically women are designed to be the containers. We're the long-term, like directional, making sure resources are shared, et cetera, et cetera. And men are fantastic producers. They have amazing energy. And I love men. I love them so much. But the construct we're living in right now has brought us so far out of balance and cut off so much of women being leaders, like co-leaders, even spiritually co-leaders. Like if you look back at Christian theology in the fourth century, Constantine came in and said, well, we can't have this equality stuff that Jesus is talking about because that doesn't look like our power structure. So we're just going to cut out all the reference to anything about women being in leadership in any of the scriptures. And we're going to make it look more like the Roman political system. Right. And that's what we've been living with forever. But that's not serving anybody. Like men don't have a soft place to land. So they're all running around lonely and mad. And I'm like, yeah, because your containers were destroyed. So there's this like imbalance of masculine, feminine energy, right? That's not serving any of us right now, biologically. And then sort of structurally, our leadership model is changing. So we've gone from this sort of hierarchical, authoritative, compartmentalized, what stays at work, what's at work stays at work. Don't bring your personal life in, that kind of stuff. Oh, I'm the boss. So what I say goes. And people rely on their positional authority to get things done. That system is crumbling because people are realizing, oh, we're human beings and we can't always compartmentalize. In fact, it's not useful for us. So it's moving into this sort of integrated relational and whole model, which is more of a feminine, like circular energy structure rather than this linear directed structure. And we're in the uncomfortable place. Sarah Tacey, she works with my mentor, Kate Northrup, as a nervous system practitioner, like regulator. And she's like, we're in the field of tension, like where we're just not quite at the new thing and we're not quite out of the old thing. And so it feels like a big mess right now. But I think what's happening is we're moving to a more integrated, more balanced way of living that gives grace to men and gives power to women and power to both so that we work together instead of like this separation. Because we're not separate. We're all connected. So those are two things I think that are in play right now that leaders in particular are really challenged by.
I love how you give so much context, Catherine. That makes a lot of sense. And I think about too that just the hormonal difference between men and women, and
right?
you're so right. There's a pressure for a level of consistency that is very unsustainable for women,
Totally.
given that 28-day or so cycle. And I've even remarked on it with my husband too, just, how, yeah, you get to be consistent day in and day out, just in terms of how you're feeling. And yet you bring in that understanding that there is a predictability for women, so long as, we're having that normal, regular cycle and health, right? But there is still that predictability, even though the changes seem a lot more drastic and we're feeling different day to day, week to week. Yeah, I think that's so fascinating. And I am starting to see a little bit more acknowledgement and awareness and understanding around it. But to your point, because of how society and especially, the workplace has been structured and set up, it's very hard for a lot of folks. I would even say I've experienced it with other women in the workplace, harder for them to also make room and space for that awareness and context too. So how do we make a better how do we make a better workplace for ourselves, or yeah, how do we at least if we're working on ourselves to start, where do we begin? Is there an approach or a framework that you like to use with your clients or would encourage people after we get from the willing phase to the work phase? Or
Think the biggest thing you can do is just admit what's happening. Admit it. Admit it and say, oh, yeah, the world's crazy right now. Well, yeah, women actually have this really different cycle. Oh, yeah, men have this different cycle. Man, that's awesome. How do we work together to leverage both of those things? How do we work to have, like, say, for example, you're in an executive team meeting and men, let's say, just, and I recognize this is also speaking very generally. And I want to recognize everyone is a unique, beautiful human and everyone has the energies of masculine and feminine in them. And when I say men and women, I mean like, here's someone who presents as a dude, and here's somebody who presents as a woman. Here's someone who presents with like really linear energy, and here's somebody who presents with really circular energy, like softer energy. So just to cover that part, right? It's like, how can we leverage each other's strengths? So in a situation where you're in an executive team meeting and you're making a decision, the people in the room that are a little bit more short term can give you bursts of energy to get things done. And then the people that see farther ahead might feel like roadblocks to taking action. But sometimes that seeing ahead can prevent disasters in the short term and the long term later on. So I think one of the biggest things we all need to do is admit that we're all human, admit that being human is the point. We are not meant to be machines. Like in the industrial age, totally made sense for us to act like mechanized pieces because the same bolt needed to be in the same hole in the same way every time to make the product, like the assembly line. But we're not in that age anymore. We're in the age of information and sharing. So we need to just go, oh, right, we're human. Being human is the point. So how do we embrace all the facets of being human and apply that, layer it over the structures that we're working in? And I think out of all the things that were terrible that came out of the pandemic, one of the most beautiful things that came out of the pandemic was humanizing. You get to see people's houses. Everybody got to work flexible schedules. Everybody could see, oh, yes, we can get our work done when we're not together. And also, we really miss being together, right? Because there's nothing that can replace the human connection, the face to face, in the room, energetic connection. And yet, there are many things that can be done because of the beautiful technology that we've developed where we can connect people from all over the world. So I think the biggest thing for when we start with the willing part, then you start with your self work. And there are many beautiful roads to do that. The way that I do it is through the vehicle of image, right? The inside out, start with that. There are people who do it through money coaching. There are people who do it through like 12-step type programs. There are people that do it through psychotherapy. There are people that do it through sports. There are people there's all kinds of ways to dig into the human condition. I think the most important thing to look at there is be embodied. Like look at somatic practices, look at nervous system regulation, because basically the last, I don't know, however many hundreds of years have disconnected us from the body. Body is sinful, body is bad, body is fallible, blah, blah, blah. When in actual fact, your body is the greatest source of information for you as a person. in terms of sensation and in terms of emotion. It's giving you information. And if you're just running around ignoring it, you're basically ignoring like 85% of the information available to you. So, willing, find a vehicle for self work, get in your body because your body is the point. That's why we're here. And people who are fully in their body, like they can feel all their sensations, they have access to information from their nervous system, they know they can identify their emotions, they know how to ride the waves of those emotions and to work with them and to allow them to give information and not to splatter all over everybody and then not to take their garbage out on somebody else, right? Figure that all out. How I learned about my emotions was when I was teaching kindergarten. And I didn't know really anything about my emotions or how to identify them before that. And I was like 25. And I learned about it by going, okay, there's only 5 core emotions: happy, sad, mad, scared, and like there's like a longing for connection or physical needs, hungry, tired. That's it. That's the basics. Like if you can identify those to start, awesome. That's a great starting place. And then you can go from there into like the nuance. There's so much emotional vocabulary that exists out there. That's wonderful. So be aware of yourself. Think about which medium is good for you to do this inquiry. It could be spiritual inquiry too. Like lots of people use different faith practices to inquire into their own self. Get connected to something outside of you. And that could be source, whatever you call it, source, universe, God, could be your community, right? Could be the energy. I don't know, maybe like quantum physics as a way of getting connected, right? But the truth is, physically in this plane, we're all connected. And there's more space here than there is matter. Right? You're not different than anybody else out there. Find a way to get connected. So yourself, do the work, get connected. And then you can start thinking about what happens. I think naturally, kind of as you do this work, you start to think about how can I serve in the world? And I don't know if that's an age thing or just an experiential thing, because I think some people, I don't think it's chronological. I think it depends on your experience. For me, it's taken me, like I'm 54 now, so it's taken me a long time. And I first sort of woke up around the age 25, 26. So that's like 30 years. But I'm also really stubborn and I like to cling to old ways. You know, it took me a little while. Some people are quicker than me. But if you're listening, like, don't wait. Don't wait is what I would say. Don't wait. Go pick up a book. Go talk to somebody who you think is on the right track. Tune into yourself. Get your feet on the grass. Get your face in the sun. Let your body feel the rain. Start there and dig into your own intuitive sense. And it's not going to, it'll never, it'll never guide you in the wrong direction if you're really connected to yourself.
And Catherine, it makes me think. I was talking to marketing and industry leaders in marketing the other day, and there are a lot of folks who are nervous about AI. It's very much integrated into our life and overwhelming and all the changes. And what you shared is a great reminder, I think, for everybody that being human is our superpower.
Yes. It's
And
the
so
whole
when we
point.
connect, yeah, connect to our own body and our physical presence, but you're also speaking holistically too. And then there's that need to connect with each other. And to your point, the screen to screen that we have is amazing. Technology is amazing that we can be here in the virtual space and same time and communicate and connect. It's not replacing the in-person connection that we all long for and certainly, missed during COVID. But you have a wonderful point that we need to get back to what it means to be human and remember that. And I think that'll help us connect to the purpose and what you're speaking to of serving. How are we helping serve? And just a wonderful way to end this season as we remind ourselves what it means to lead ourselves and lead other people and get back to the core of what it means to be human. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
And I know we could go so much deeper too, but in the respect for your time and our audience, I want to invite you back anytime, Catherine. This has just been a wonderful conversation, and I feel so inspired and encouraged by it. I hope our audience does too. I would love them to connect with you so that they could do that willing work
Yeah,
with you,
love it.
should they wish. Where would you like them to find you online?
I think the easiest place to find me is on Instagram, just Katherine Lazaruk. I'm easy to find. And I'm also on LinkedIn. And if you really want to get some in depth insights, come to my website. If you go to the link and you put in your email and your name, you can get onto my whole notes list, which is my weekly dose of insight, ahas, vulnerable moments. And it comes every week, Thursday, 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. So if you want a more connection and community, that's the place to be, is on my whole notes list.
I'm gonna make sure that I'm on the whole notes list. I feel like I had so many great epiphany aha moments today,
Yay!
thanks to you.
That's what I
And
do.
thank you I love it. Well, I appreciate you, Catherine, and all that you shared today, and our audience for tuning in and listening to another episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders podcast. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.